Welcome to the Rhetorics, where we break down these arguments shaping really crucial conversations happening globally.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be looking at this compelling case for an independent Igbo Biafra presented by
Right.
Uche Meffor, who is a leading voice
Absolutely.
in the movement.
Yes.
And it's a document that's really fueled by history and claims of this systemic marginalization
Yeah.
and these striking parallels drawn to Kosovo's journey
Yes.
to self-determination.
Absolutely. And I think it's fascinating how this episode is powered by the indigenous people of Igbo Nation for Self-Determination,
Right.
IPNS, and the Igbo Biafra Nationalists, IBN, ably convened by Uche Meffor.
Exactly. And right from the start, this document, it pulls no punches.
No.
Using the term structural apartheid
Yeah.
to describe the Igbo people's experience in Nigeria.
Absolutely. It's such a powerful analogy, and it aims to expose these deep-seated inequalities that Meffor argues have been deliberately woven into the fabric of Nigerian society.
And to illustrate this structural apartheid, Meffor dives deep into the historical context, particularly focusing on what he calls the balkanization
Yeah.
of the Igbo people. And it's not just about physical borders.
No.
It's about how political power and economic opportunities have been systematically chipped away.
It's fascinating how Meffor connects this balkanization to a deliberate strategy of limiting Igbo influence.
Right.
He points to the southeast region only having 5 states, which leads to this stark underrepresentation in the National Assembly.
Yeah.
This, he argues, creates this ripple effect, weakening their voice on national policy and ultimately hindering their access to resources and development.
It's like he paints this picture of a cycle of disadvantage,
Yes.
where limited political representation translates to less funding for infrastructure, education, and economic development, further entrenching the region's struggles.
Absolutely. And this is where things take an even darker turn.
Yeah.
Meffor doesn't shy away from alleging state-sponsored violence against the Igbo people, particularly targeting the youth.
He specifically highlights military operations, like Operation Python Dance, claiming they were far from simple peacekeeping missions.
Right.
Instead, he argues they were deliberate attempts to suppress any pro-Biafra sentiment.
Yes.
And even more chillingly, to dismantle the region's future leadership by targeting its young people.
And he doesn't hesitate to use the term ethnic cleansing in this context, drawing a direct link between these operations and a calculated strategy of depopulation.
Wow.
These are incredibly serious allegations.
Yeah.
And they lay the groundwork for his call for international intervention.
And here's where that Kosovo parallel comes in.
Right.
Meffor invokes the concept of sui generis justification for secession, basically arguing that the Igbo people's suffering is so unique and exceptional that it demands a solution outside the typical blames, just like Kosovo.
Exactly.
He claims the southeast region deserves international recognition and support for its right to self-determination.
And he meticulously builds his case, citing alleged instances of ethnic cleansing political apartheid and the Nigerian state's persistent failure to address the deep-seated grievances of the Igbo people.
Right.
This isn't just about historical wrongs. It's about a present and ongoing threat, he argues, one that requires urgent action from the global community.
And to bolster this call for international intervention, Meffor turns to a powerful, legal, and ethical framework. The responsibility to protect, or R2P.
R2P, that's right.
It's a weighty doctrine rooted in the idea that the international community has a moral obligation to prevent mass atrocities, even if it means intervening in a sovereign state's affairs.
It's fascinating how Meffor uses R2P to frame the situation in southeast Nigeria as not just an internal Nigerian issue, but a matter of global concern.
Right.
He directly links the alleged ethnic cleansing, political apartheid, and the Nigerian government's inaction to trigger the R2P framework.
Yeah.
Essentially saying the world has a duty to act.
It's a bold strategy, raising the stakes and putting the Igbo Biafra issue on the international stage.
Absolutely.
He's carefully constructed an argument that goes beyond just historical grievances and aspirations for independence.
Right.
He's framing it as a matter of human rights, international law, and global security.
And that leads us to one of the most crucial elements of his argument, secession as a remedial process.
Right.
It's not just about wanting independence, it's about presenting secession as the only viable solution, the last resort, for a people who, according to Meffor, have exhausted all other avenues for justice and security.
He's essentially arguing that the Igbo people have been pushed to a point where secession, despite its inherent risks and challenges, is the only way to ensure their survival and protect their fundamental rights.
Exactly. So we've established that, Metaphor presents this powerful argument, right? Weaving together the historical grievances and the allegations of this ongoing oppression and that call for international action. But
Right.
let's not shy away from these massive implications of what he's proposing, because secession is a seismic event.
Absolutely.
It's one that reshapes maps and destinies.
Yeah.
It's not a decision to be taken lightly.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in the rhetoric, but we need to really grapple with the potential consequences,
Right.
both intended and unintended.
Right.
What could secession actually mean on the ground for the Southeast region, for Nigeria as a whole, and for the international community watching this unfold?
Well, Mayfor kind of paints this picture of an independent Igbo Biafra as a haven from this systemic discrimination that he outlines, right?
Yeah.
He envisions a society where the Igbo people control their own destiny, free to build a future based on their own values and aspirations.
A future where resources are equitably distributed, where political representation reflects the will of the people, and where the Igbo people can finally prosper without the shackles of structural disadvantage.
Right.
It's a compelling vision, but is it realistic?
That's the core question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even with the best intentions, independence wouldn't magically erase the challenges that are inherent in building a new nation. There's the immediate issue of economic viability. The Southeast region is deeply integrated into the Nigerian economy. How would those ties be severed and replaced? Could new trade partnerships be forged quickly enough to avoid significant disruption and hardship?
And what about the potential for internal division?
Oh, absolutely.
You mentioned earlier that the Igbo people aren't a monolithic group.
Right.
Could different political factions or religious groups or even regional identities within the Igbo community create friction and instability as they try to forge a new national identity?
Those are very real concerns.
Yeah.
A successful secession would require not just independence, but unity. Could a newly formed Igbo Biafra government effectively manage these internal dynamics? Would it be able to establish a stable and functioning democracy that represents the diverse voices within its borders?
And then there's the question of how Nigeria itself would respond.
Right.
This isn't just about losing territory. It's about the potential for deep-seated resentment and even violent conflict. Nigeria has already experienced a brutal civil war over Biafra in the late 1960s, a trauma that still casts a long shadow over the nation. Could secession reignite those flames of division and conflict?
It's a chilling thought, and one that can't be ignored.
Yeah.
Nigeria is already grappling with ethnic tensions, religious divides, and economic instability. A successful secession in the southeast could embolden other regions with separatist aspirations, further fragmenting the nation and plunging it into deeper turmoil.
And let's not forget the human cost of such upheaval.
Right.
It's often the most vulnerable who bear the brunt of conflict and instability. Displacement, violence, and economic hardship could become widespread realities.
Absolutely. And all of this plays out on a global stage.
Yeah.
The international community is notoriously cautious when it comes to secessionist movements, especially those that could destabilize entire regions.
Right.
There's a deep-seated reluctance to set precedents that might encourage other separatist groups around the world.
So even if Igbo Biafra declared independence, it's not a guarantee of international recognition.
Right.
Or acceptance. They could face a long and uphill battle to secure their place on the world stage, potentially becoming an isolated state, struggling for legitimacy and economic survival.
And without that recognition, they would face immense challenges in areas like international trade diplomacy and even travel. It's a sobering reality check to the often romanticized vision of secession.
We've laid out some stark potential downsides.
Yeah.
But it's important to acknowledge that maintaining the status quo also carries risks.
Absolutely.
If the underlying grievances of the Igbo people aren't addressed, if the cycle of marginalization and alleged violence continues, the pressure for secession could only intensify.
And that's the crux of the dilemma, isn't it?
Yeah.
Both secession and the status quo present complex challenges and potential dangers. There are no easy answers, no guaranteed paths to peace and prosperity.
So where do we go from here? How do we navigate this complex terrain and find a way forward that addresses the legitimate concerns of the Igbo people without unleashing further chaos and suffering?
That's the question we'll explore in the final part of our analysis. We've dissected the arguments, weighed the potential consequences, and now we have to grapple with the most challenging task of all, finding a path towards a just and sustainable solution.
We've spent this whole episode grappling with this really powerful and deeply complex argument for Igbo Biafra secession.
Yeah.
We've kind of gone through the historical context and unpacked the claims of this, systemic marginalization and this alleged violence, and weighed the potential consequences of such a drastic move.
Absolutely. And what stands out to me is this depth of frustration and disillusionment that really fuels this movement.
Yeah.
Manethore's rhetoric isn't just about abstract political theory. It's about this profound sense of injustice and a yearning for self-determination that resonates deeply with many Igbo people.
It's clear the status quo isn't working.
No.
Ignoring or dismissing these grievances would be a grave mistake.
A huge mistake.
But as we've discussed, secession itself is fraught with risk and uncertainty.
Yeah.
So how do we bridge this divide? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think the first step is acknowledging the need for this genuine dialogue, right?
Right.
This space where the concerns of the Igbo people can be heard and addressed without preconditions or dismissal.
Yeah.
This requires both sides to come to the table with a willingness to listen and a commitment to finding common ground.
That means the Nigerian government needs to move beyond just paying lip service to unity.
Right.
And actually address the root causes of this discontent. It's about tackling issues like political representation, resource allocation, and these allegations of human rights abuses head on.
And it's about creating a system where all Nigerians feel like equal stakeholders, regardless of their ethnicity or region. It's a tall order.
Yeah.
But it's essential if Nigeria is to truly live up to its promise of unity and progress.
On the other side, the Igbo Biafra movement needs to be willing to engage in this dialogue constructively, recognizing that secession isn't a guaranteed solution. It's about finding ways to address their concerns within the framework of a united Nigeria, if possible.
And it's about acknowledging that independence wouldn't be a utopia. There would still be challenges to overcome internal divisions, to manage and economic realities to confront a successful future, whether within or outside of Nigeria, requires this pragmatic and inclusive approach.
So we're left with this delicate balancing act.
Absolutely.
Finding a solution that respects the rights and aspirations of the Igbo people while preserving the stability and integrity of Nigeria as a whole. It won't be easy, and it will require compromise and empathy from all sides.
What's crucial, I think, is shifting the focus from this zero-sum game to one of mutual benefit.
Right.
How can we create a system where the success of one group doesn't come at the expense of another?
Yeah.
How can we build a Nigeria where all citizens feel a sense of belonging and opportunity?
These are questions that demand our attention, our thoughtful engagement, and our commitment to finding solutions that prioritize peace, justice, and a shared future for all Nigerians. And as we conclude this episode of The Rhetorics, we urge you, our listeners, to continue this conversation.
Yes.
Engage with diverse perspectives, challenge your own assumptions, and seek understanding beyond the headlines.
Absolutely.
The future of Nigeria and the well-being of its people depends on our collective willingness to listen, to learn, and to work together towards a more just and equitable future. Thank you for joining us.